I do believe we are in an era now where, being the CEO gives you a platform. And I think of it not so much about me as an individual, but the responsibility of the office of the CEO to have the guts, to have the courage to take a stand on important issues that are affecting our world.
Yep.
And to not be afraid. You got to have thick skin to do it. We asked gun owners to not bring a gun into our stores because we have an employee policy. They can't bring guns into the stores. And in states with open carry laws, our employees were concerned.
Yep.
And then we had somebody literally shoot themselves in the foot in one of our stores, and that was it. It was like, you don't need a weapon to try on a pair of jeans. So we're not afraid to take a stand, and we're not afraid to stand up for the right thing.
One of the lessons I've learned in martial arts is that standing still is asking to be hit. If you stand still in business, your competition is going to catch up. I start each morning practicing martial arts because it brings me balance and focus. And I want to know how others stay motivated as well. So join me for conversations on business, innovation, and entrepreneurship. I'm Dan Schulman. Welcome to Never Stand Still. Hi, I'm Dan Schulman, and welcome to Never Stand Still. Today, I'm thrilled to have with me Chip Bergh, who is the CEO of Levi Strauss. Chip, and there you can see it right there, proudly wearing that iconic brand.
It's in my contract.
It's great. And by the way, it's not in my contract.
And you still wear it. That's right.
Single day, I wear my Levi's. I was trying to think of the last 1,000 days. I probably have worn Levi's 990 of those, maybe more on that. And Chip spent 28 years at P&G and joined Levi's in 2011 and has an amazing, really, story to tell in terms of really revitalizing the brand and turning around a lot of what had been happening with this company and all with everything going on in retail right now. So, Chip, you again started in 2011. The company had been going through really declining sales for a while. And despite my best efforts to prop up those sales, it had continued to go down. And then you came into the company and really thought about the brand, thought about what was happening. Could you maybe tell our audience a little bit about how you started that journey of thinking about what you were going to go do? Not really what you did, but like what was the leadership lessons that you employed as you went into the company?
Yeah, first of all, part of the reason I joined was I saw in the Levi's brand in particular, one of the most iconic brands in the world.
Absolutely.
And I'm a brand building guy when all is said and done. And, looking at the history of the company, which peaked in 1996 at $7.5 billion in sales and then declined to $4 billion in sales over the next couple of years and just kind of bounced around for the next decade. The company's been around for 165 years. It's one of the greatest, original American companies, started right here in San Francisco, not very far from where we're sitting right now. And I just saw this latent opportunity to get this brand turned around again. So when I started, I had my own hypotheses of where the opportunities were, but the first thing I did was I went on a listening tour. Mm-hmm. I sent 6 questions to the top 60 people in the company, kind of, what 3 things do you think we have to keep? What 3 things have to change? What's the one thing you hope I will do? What's the one thing you're afraid I might do? What piece of advice do you have for me? Yeah. And I did 60 1-hour, I emailed the questions out in advance, and I did 60 1-hour interviews. And after about 15 interviews, it became really, really clear where some of the issues were. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a clear strategy. People were working against their own functional or business agenda, but nothing was kind of knitted together. So everybody was rowing in a different direction. We hadn't been investing in building the brand. We hadn't been investing in innovation. We were really disconnected with the consumer. Our advertising was not working.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of just very fundamental issues. Our balance sheet was a mess. We had $2 billion in debt. We were spending more money on interest payments than we were on media globally. So
Wow.
there was a lot of low-hanging fruit to go after. And probably the toughest thing was prioritizing the sequence of work to go after it and make it then happen. But we're back on offense. We were very much on our heels and playing defense, and it really was, I think, in the early parts of the 2000s, it was all hands on deck just to pay the interest payments on the debt that we had.
Yeah.
And we paid off $1 billion in debt. We're reinvesting back in marketing. We did go through a very difficult restructure where we cut headcount by about 20%, which we needed to do.
Yeah.
But that gave
never
us
an easy
the oxygen.
decision. Yeah.
It gave us the oxygen to begin investing back
Yeah.
in the brand and doing cool things like Levi's Stadium. And now we've got an advertising campaign that we've been running for about 4 years called Live in Levi's, which really embraces what the essence of this brand is all about. And back on offense, investing in our brands again.
Yeah, and it's really paid off. I mean, you're having your highest sales in a decade now. You've definitely reversed that trend right now.
Sure.
But within that context, and you and I have talked about this in other times that we've met, there's such a changing face of commerce that's going on right now in retail in general. There's a combination of the shift from offline to online. You're even though finding online players shifting into
Physical retail.
Retail. You're seeing people now start to do in-store kind of brands, not really brands anymore. How are you navigating through that? Like, what are the big trends that you're seeing in retail right now, and how are you starting to navigate through that in order to just keep the growth that you've seen?
Yeah, well, we compete in multiple channels. So we have a big wholesale business. So we sell product to Macy's and Kohl's and JCPenney and customers like that. We sell to Amazon, pure play e-commerce business. Plus, we also have our own brick and mortar retail, both mainline doors and outlet doors. And we also have our own e-commerce site. So I would say one of the things...
They know me because I get an email from them almost every single day, by the way.
And you open it, and
I open it
occasionally
and
you
look
will
at
buy
it, and
some.
I do buy, yes.
So the first big learning has been you've got to manage the marketplace as a marketplace. You can't start competing across channels.
Which isn't easy, right?
Which is not easy, especially on a business as big as ours.
Yeah.
But I would say the most important thing is you've got to follow the consumer and where the consumer is going and how they are choosing to shop. A consumer doesn't roll out of bed and say, today I think is a mainline store day, or today is going to be an e-commerce day.
Right.
They're shopping on multiple channels kind of all the time, and you've got to have that consistent experience that's consistent across channels, but you also have to give them a reason to want to walk into your store. If a consumer knows you're a 5'11" guy and you know you're a 5'11" guy, if we don't give you a reason to walk into our store, you're going to go to Amazon.com or Kohl's.com or Macy's.com, and that's okay. But by giving the consumer a reason to walk into the door, an experience, superior service, you can still drive traffic into your brick and mortar stores and then potentially upsell and add more items to the basket. So we really focus on that, while at the same time making sure that when the consumer is in our store, they're getting a very consistent experience from an omni-channel standpoint. Because they're going to go on their phone and they're going to look at something in our store and they're going to see if they can find a better price somewhere else. And that's why managing the marketplace as a holistic enterprise, if you want to think about it that way, across all the different channels where we compete is really important. And then really putting a focus on giving the consumer an amazing experience in the areas that we control. And our brick and mortar business, it's grown globally for the last 12 quarters. We don't report comp store growth, but our our total direct-to-consumer business, which is both e-commerce and brick and mortar, has grown double-digit now for the last 12 quarters.
That's amazing.
And we're doing it double-digit growth globally and consistently growing across all three regions as we report.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I say this at PayPal all the time, but I think the most successful companies in the world are those that are consumer champion companies. And you've said that now 2 or 3 times, and I couldn't agree with it more. You put the consumer front and center, even if it challenges your own business model, you win over the medium and long term.
Yeah. And if the consumer is challenging your own business model, you better challenge it too.
You bet. Exactly right.
Because somebody is going to disrupt you if you don't disrupt yourself.
Yeah. In fact, one of the things that you've done, which I don't know if people realize, is just how much investment in technology you've done. You've done this Eureka Labs. You've done these now custom. You know, I'm wearing them right now.
Paralot ones. Customized jeans.
So, can you talk a little bit about that investment in technology? Because most people wouldn't necessarily think about Levi's and a technology lab per se, but you've actually really done some very cool things by looking at that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, this goes all the way back to very early, shortly after I started. We actually had a small innovation lab, but it was over in Turkey, in Çorlu, Turkey, and most of our designers and merchants were here in San Francisco. So it was planes, trains, and automobiles, and so innovation really didn't get a lot of attention. And I also thought, gosh, here we are. At that time, it was the tip of Silicon Valley, the northern tip of South. Now it is Silicon Valley, right? Silicon Valley has moved into the city, and we didn't have a playground to attract creative talent to work with us, to partner with us. And so one of the biggest early investments I made was in the Eureka Lab, which is just a couple blocks away from our headquarters. It's on Chestnut Street here in the city. And it is effectively a small pilot plant. We've got laundry there. We've got rolls and rolls, thousands of yards of different types of denim. We've got lasers there, which we've done some pretty cool stuff with here lately. And it gives us an opportunity to really experiment and try new technologies. And it became a reason why Google wanted to partner with us on Project Jacquard, which is an early stage wearable technology where you can control your cell phone from the sleeve of your trucker jacket, and you can answer calls, you can forward and back and reverse your playlist. But part of the reason Google wanted to work with us was, one, our scale and the fact that we know denim. It is very cool. And number two, we had this lab where we could build pilot product and test it in washing machines and stuff like that. So probably the biggest innovation, though, that we've been working on, and I've said that we need to pivot from being an apparel company that happens to think about technology, that our future is a technology company that happens to make blue jeans. We are quickly becoming a technology company. And so the biggest innovation that we're working on now is a project called FLX, which is about finishing denim using lasers. It's sustainably far superior than the traditional method. But if you were to buy a pair of jeans like you're wearing, kind of highly finished, a lot of people like destruction, the holes and the rips in it. It actually takes today, the way those kind of jeans are made, it takes a human about 20 minutes to make a pair of jeans that look like that. It's all done by hand. In the future, we're going to be able to do that with a laser in about 90 seconds. And it will be perfectly consistent, perfectly consistent every single time. We're now designing all of our products digitally, on a digital iPad type of device. So everything's being designed digitally. We're shipping digital files directly to the laser. There's no middleman in between. And then digitally producing them off of a laser. That opens the opportunity to dramatically shorten the supply chain. We could conceivably have lasers in every distribution center. It shortens the time to market. It takes inventory out. It is a majorly disruptive innovation for us, but I think also for the entire industry. Yeah,
it's very cool. One of the things that I've seen through all these interviews that I've done, there's sort of no pun intended, a common thread, which is that a lot of the CEOs that I talk to have a liberal arts education. I think you went to Lafayette.
I did.
And
you went to Middlebury,
and I went to Middlebury. Yeah, exactly. And so, how do you think that intersects with being a leader? Because most people, today, they're all about you need to be able to do engineering or product or what, but a lot of the CEOs are liberal arts backgrounds.
Yeah.
Your thoughts around that?
I just, it's funny. I went back to Lafayette for the first time in probably 35 years, just about a year ago. And it was amazing being back on campus. And it did kind of force me to step back and think about what was it about Lafayette that kind of contributed to the person that I am today and to my success.
Yeah.
And I do think that the liberal arts education forced me or helped create me to become more of an expansive thinker. I think natural curiosity is a big part of being successful at any level, but I do believe CEOs just have to have this natural inquisitiveness and this constant thirst to want to learn. And I think I got that from my liberal arts education. I wound up majoring in international affairs in part because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to major in, and that was like a combination of multiple majors.
I majored in geography, so
okay, so
I
real
didn't
close.
know either.
And and then I went into the military after college for 4 years, and that also kind of the combination of the liberal arts degree from Lafayette and this curiosity and just this thirst for learning and never wanting to stop learning. And always feeling like there's more to learn.
Yeah.
That was the other thing. I always felt like, even at the end of the day, if I got an A in a subject, I still felt there was a lot more to learn.
Yeah.
And that combined with kind of the discipline and everything that I got out of the military, the combination of those two things really set me up for success, I think.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that military experience. You were ROTC, I think.
Yes.
And I think you even went to jump school.
I did.
And then you went
Jumped out of airplanes, perfectly good airplanes.
Yep. Were you perfectly good at jumping out of them as well?
I was.
Okay,
I survived it.
Exactly. And then you went into the Army as an officer for, I think you just said 4 years. How did that experience as being an officer in the Army prepare you for leadership roles as well? Because we think a lot about hiring veterans, et cetera, but I'd love to hear what it did for you.
I mean, I can sit here right now and honestly say I wouldn't be sitting here today if I hadn't spent 4 years in the military. It really did make me who I am as a leader. It made me really learn leadership kind of firsthand.
Yeah.
I think, I actually wrote an article which is posted on LinkedIn and it's flying around the internet. And I wrote this about almost 20 years ago, I think, the 10 lessons I learned from being a military officer. And number one was always eat last, take care of your troops. We were talking right before we went on air. Number 7 is never dig in and defend, which is kind of never stand still. And when I wrote the article, I said if you dig a foxhole and you're standing in a foxhole, you've just dug your own grave.
Yeah.
You've got to be moving. And when in doubt, number 6 is when in doubt, attack.
Right.
Always have a plan B. Another one of the lessons was called walk the track park, which was military for, you can always determine a well-disciplined organization or a disciplined organization by walking through their track park where they kept their tanks or their vehicles, and were they perfectly lined up, were they topped off with gas, were they ready to go to war if the balloon went up, as they proverbially say.
Yeah.
But probably the biggest thing I learned was, I when I was commissioned, I was a second lieutenant. And when I got over to Germany after officer basic school, I had a platoon sergeant who reported to me, who was a staff sergeant. I had 4 squad leaders who reported to him and to me. All 5 of them were Vietnam veterans. This was 1979. It was not long after the Vietnam War. These guys had had bullets flying over their heads in real life. And just because I was a second lieutenant and they were supposed to salute me and call me sir didn't necessarily earn their respect. And I had to earn their respect. And one of the other lessons is never ask a soldier to do something you yourself wouldn't do or couldn't do. And so through those kind of through 4 years of that kind of experience, and it was in West Germany at the time, still West Germany, during the Cold War. My unit patrolled the east-west border twice a year. We were stationed about 20 or 25 kilometers from the east-west border, and if the balloon went up, the Russian hordes were going to come across through the Fulda Gap, and we were one of the first lines of defense. So it was real, and
amazing.
It grows you up pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those lessons. Can you email me?
Yeah.
I'll look it up at LinkedIn as well. You also have taken a bunch of bold stances as well as a CEO. Both of us are known a little bit as being activist CEOs. Mm-hmm. We're willing to take a stand. You've done some in both wellness and well-being, but you've taken stands on supply chain, environmental issues, supply chain well-being. Can you talk a little bit about why you do that? And some people always ask me, like, why are you taking a stance on something? And I talk about it being part and parcel of the values of our company. I'm curious, why you also take such an active stand on some very important issues of our day.
It really does get back to the values of the company. I mean, this is a company, Levi Strauss and Company. Like I said, it's been around 165 years, and through our history, we have a long tradition of being very values-based, very values-driven, and not being afraid to stick our neck out on important social issues of the day. And when Levi Strauss, the man himself, made his first profit, he contributed part of it to an orphanage here in San Francisco. And we still give a lot of money philanthropically through the Levi Strauss Foundation. But our history is kind of, it's a proud history of where the company has taken stands. We desegregated our plants in the South 10 years before it was the law of the land.
Love that.
We provided health care for same-sex partners long before other companies did that. We were on the early front lines of the HIV/AIDS crisis here in San Francisco when that first erupted, and our CEO stood in the lobby of our building handing out pamphlets to all the employees about HIV/AIDS. This one is really recent, actually, but in the 1990s, when the Boy Scouts banned gay troop leaders, we withdrew all of our funding from the Boy Scouts. And over the next week, this was before the internet, the company was flooded, 100,000 pieces of mail, 97,000 people opposed to the company's position.
Yep.
And fast forward now 20 some odd years, and you look at that and you go, history proved us right.
Yep.
We were on the right side of the issue. It just took a while for everybody else to catch up to it, and now the Boy Scouts have dropped the name boy from Scouts.
Yeah.
So I think it's a responsibility, and I do believe we're in an era now where, being the CEO gives you a platform, and I think of it not so much about me as an individual, but the responsibility of the office of the CEO to have the guts, to have the courage to take a stand on important issues that are affecting our world.
Yep.
And to not be afraid. You got to have thick skin to do it. We asked gun owners to not bring a gun into our stores because we have an employee policy. They can't bring guns into the stores, and in states with open carry laws, our employees were concerned.
Yep.
And then we had somebody literally shoot themselves in the foot in one of our stores, and that was it. It was like, you don't need a weapon to try on a pair of jeans. So we're not afraid to take a stand, and we're not afraid to stand up for the right thing. Just recently, the immigration ban and DACA are two other issues which we took a big hardline stand on. The worker well-being program is something that's really near and dear to my heart. We make our product all over the world, but it's largely in third world developing countries. It is mostly women who make our product. If you've ever been to an apparel company or to an apparel factory, the building might be 100 meters long, and you've just got, it's piece part work.
Yeah.
It's basically assembly line work where you've got people sewing and putting together a pair of pants. And these are poor towns and villages where a lot of these people live, and we believed that we had an opportunity to work with the factory owners. We don't own most of our factories. We work through third-party vendors to work with the factory owners to give these workers a better life, basically. And so we piloted this through the Levi Strauss Foundation. We provided the funding initially to pilot it, but we knew that it needed to be sustainable. We needed to prove that there was a business case that the factory owners would say, this makes sense for me to invest in. So we ran these pilots, which we funded, to demonstrate that business case, that if you invest in your workers, and it varied from country to country what was required. In one country it might have been financial literacy and helping the women establish banking relationships. In another country it might have been childcare. So from factory to factory, the specific needs varied. But we demonstrated pretty consistently a $3 to $4 return on every dollar invested. So now it is a sustainable program. We're now saying, if you want to do business with us, Mr. Factory Owner, we expect you to have this worker well-being program in place. And I've met with a couple of the CEOs of some of our partners, and it's had an amazing impact on a couple of them. I mean, one company down in Mexico basically changed their mission by seeing the impact that they could have, not just on their workers, but in the community around them by making these investments in their workers' lives. They've got happier workers. And the reason there's this return is people come back to work every day and they don't want to leave. They like it. So if you're running an assembly line with 1,000 sewing machines, if 50 people don't show up, you got a problem. And so they've got higher retention, much lower turnover, more engaged employees, higher levels of productivity, and that's where they saw the return on investment.
I love that story.
So now we've reached 150,000 people. We've now open sourced it. So we've said to our competitors or to anybody else who's got a supply chain, we've got a playbook. We got a playbook. And the Harvard School of Business Health is doing a case study on it now too, and kind of providing some external validation around the business case.
I bet the result of that is you also have employees that are so proud to work for the company. And when you have employees that rally behind your mission and your values, and they see you taking those values and turning them into action as opposed to hanging up on a wall, then they're inspired.
Well, and that San Francisco is a pretty tough job market. And most of our employees, unless you're a designer or maybe a merchant, the skill set is pretty fungible. And they can pretty much go anywhere they want right now in San Francisco. And one of the things that does keep a lot of our employees loyal to Levi Strauss is the values of the company. And they see that we're not afraid to take a hard stand or to stick our neck out and stand up for the things that really matter most.
So this show, part of it, or what inspired it for me, was to talk to people I admire and great leaders, and to find out not only what their thoughts were around what made them successful, but also the challenges that they had, and this whole idea of, you're always going to be hit in life. Regardless of whether you stand still or not, you're going to get hit. And then how do you recover from that? And what are some of those lessons? And I think it'd be really instructive, Chip, for the people who are watching this to hear, times where you've actually had some doubts and have maybe even fallen, and how you got back up and how you kept going to where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's perfect. So, I mean, the first place my head went to when you asked this question is my first marriage, which failed. And actually, I learned from it. I mean, we were standing still, and if a relationship isn't getting better, it doesn't really stand still.
Yeah.
It starts getting worse. And,
Yeah.
and over time, that's basically what happened in my first marriage. And that was tough.
Tough.
I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if I'd ever get back up. And I wound up pouring myself back into my work. But, fast forward, I remarried 13 and a half years ago to an incredible woman, and we've got a 9-year-old daughter.
Oh,
And
so great.
so I got a second chance, and I've been hell-bent and determined to make sure that the trend line in our marriage is always going up and it's not standing still, or
Yeah.
because if you think it's standing still, it's really not.
Probably
It's going
going
down,
down,
right?
yeah.
So that's the first place my head went. From a career standpoint, I've had a lot of mistakes. Probably the story that I like to tell, it's a little bit of a chuckle now in hindsight, but I was a brand manager on Duncan Hines baking mixes. And this is back in the early 1990s. And, moms weren't staying at home anymore, and they weren't baking birthday cakes anymore for their kids. They would just go to Kroger or Safeway or whatever and buy the birthday cake there. And, now birthday parties have gotten completely out of control. But so they weren't baking from baking mixes anymore.
Yeah.
So we had developed this incredibly cool idea of shaped cake kits with a shaped pan that would be pre-included. And the pan was made out of like a thick corrugated, kind of like a Chinette plate.
Yeah.
And it was shaped in different characters. So we had like Mickey Mouse, we had licensing arrangements with Disney, with Kermit the Frog, with Major League Baseball, with the NFL. So we had all these cake kits with these cardboard. We had tested this thing extensively. We ran a test market in Cincinnati, tested it in our labs, test market in Cincinnati, off the chart successful. And the cake kits came with not just the pan, but the baking mix, the frosting, cardboard cutouts, so you could make Miss Piggy. You could make Kermit the Frog. So everything was looking great. We went into a real live, large, what was called a Bases test market back then, working with Nielsen Bases, down in the South. And the product had been in market no more than 2 days, and our consumer services call center started getting phone calls that the cake pans were catching fire in some consumers' ovens. And we literally almost burned down a consumer's house. I mean, literally, the draperies were on fire, and if there hadn't been fire extinguishers in the house, we might have done some real serious damage. I honestly thought I was going to get fired. I mean, I thought it was over, because we had tested this thing every which way from Sunday. Out of this comes a learning, though. So we decided, let's buy the ovens from these consumers who have had problems. Let's ship them up to our lab. Let's understand what happened here. Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, what did we discover? That the thermostat on these ovens
was broken.
Didn't work. So they would set it for 350 and the oven would go to 800 degrees or something. And the cake pan works perfectly fine at 350 degrees, but not so much at 800 degrees. How the consumer...
Imagine the rest of their food.
I mean, they were cooking their holiday turkey in 25 minutes or something. But and
the early iteration of the microwave.
Anyway, so I literally thought I was going to get fired, but because we had to do an expensive recall. We had to take product off of the shelf. We had to ask consumers to send their product back. We had to publicize it, on the evening news. We had to say Duncan Hines is running a recall. I mean, not good for brand building, right? And I thought that was it. I was done. But however, I will tell you, that lesson has stayed with me so long that when we talked about the Google jacket earlier. And I said, we've got to start slow on this because, we've never done wearable technology before. So we'll do a couple hundred pieces in the first, a couple hundred units in the first, because what if it catches fire? I mean, that's the first thing that went through my head is we don't want to burn somebody's forearm, right?
Yeah.
Thank heavens, touch wood, that has not happened.
Right.
But, and always have a plan B as a leader was one of my military lessons.
Yeah.
And, you've planned for the worst and hope for the best, right? And we thought we had been completely checked out on the pre-market qualification of this, and we weren't, as it turned out.
Yeah, such an interesting, amusing now, but interesting story. But Chip, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure getting together.
It's great to see you,
Dan.
Dan.
You for being here.
Thank you very much. Great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.